Back in 2023,
Technically 2024, considering the fact that the following video was released in December of that year.
I took a look at Diary of a Wimpy Kid 2021, the first animated adaptation of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, or as I like to call it, the watered-down remake of the first live-action movie from 2010. If you've seen my review on the film,
If you haven't, go watch that video to get a refresher of what I fully think about that movie, since this review is going to be a follow-up to that, but with the sequel instead.
But to summarize, the animated remake of Diary of a Wimpy Kid 2010 is basically just a watered-down version of the 2010 movie. Basically, imagine the live-action remakes that Disney had put out over the years, but you just make it animated instead. That's this movie in a nutshell, but instead of dragging everything out, they omitted so many elements from the original movie to the point where the movie has no time for us to get to know anyone else. Certain plot points make no sense now, and most importantly, it felt soullessly manufactured to the point where all of the soul and things that made the original so enjoyable are completely erased from the movie, leading the film to not have any rewatch value whatsoever, and I doubt that anyone would want to watch that film over the 2010 movie. Though, considering the fact that Disney presumably rushed the production of the film, that's probably the reason as to why it ended up coming out as rough as it was, or because of another factor. Jeff Kinney, the original author of the books, went to Disney wanting to be involved in the production of movies revolving around Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but the catch was that they had to remake the first two movies first before they could make something more original. Which is why in 2023, we got Cabin Fever, which finally had them go into a more original direction, but I honestly think that they should have done that in the first place, because we already have a live-action version of the first movie, and we certainly already have a live-action movie version of today's subject, Rodrick Rules. I really didn't have any high expectations going into this movie. Before I watched this movie, I've been hearing by word of mouth that this movie is just as bad, if not worse than the first movie, which I didn't even like in the first place. However, even those who didn't hate the first movie have said that they really didn't like this one, and given that we're now on season 2 of Sean's yearly reviews, I thought that it would be fitting to take a look at this one as SYR 212, since the first animated Diary of a Wimpy Kid movie was the 12th episode in production order. And yeah, this one is very, very bad. Full disclosure, in this review, I'm not going to touch upon the animation because I already touched upon it enough in the review of the first movie, and nothing about the animation in this movie has changed at all, presumably because this movie was in production immediately after the first movie wrapped up its production. And guess what? This film came out less than a year after the first, meaning that Disney gave them very tight deadlines. And it shows that they were able to get this movie done in under a year, because just like the first movie, this film literally does nothing but take elements directly from the original while not understanding what made the original work. Just like the original movie, this film omits so many aspects from the original live-action film, which results in this film to feel very incomplete, which is incredibly baffling because this movie is 14 minutes longer than the original. While it has been a while since I watched the live-action version, if you watched this movie with the most basic knowledge of what happened in the live-action version, you'd see that something is up immediately. Want to know how this movie begins? They start off the film by jumping immediately into the parents going away for the weekend, instead of simply building up to this. In the original film, the reason why the parents left them alone for the weekend was because Greg and Rodrick didn't get along with each other very well. This especially came to a head in the sequence where Greg gets humiliated at church because Manny left his chocolate bar in the car, which Greg sat on, making it look like he pooped his pants. And Rodrick basically puts his foot on the sweater to reveal the poop-like stain, causing Greg to attack Rodrick. So, as a result of this, Greg and Rodrick were left on their own. But in this movie, there's literally nothing. Please tell me, Mr. and Mrs. Heffley, why do you trust Rodrick exactly? You guys have seen the kind of stuff that he would do. And you guys have zero reason at all to even trust him because he doesn't seem at all like he he's someone who is very responsible. And when they proceed to have Greg and Rodrick stay with their grandfather, the question is then raised, why didn't they have Greg and Rodrick go there in the first place? Oh, it's because they wanted Greg and Rodrick to get along with each other. Gee, maybe if you showed that they didn't get along with each other, I'd buy it. I mean, he was barely even present in the first animated movie because they spent most of it focusing on Greg and Rowley's friendship. The live-action version did this after it was found out by the parents that Greg and Rodrick threw a party. Them having the reveal done after they were forced to stay with their grandfather just destroys the plot, because this moment proved that the parents couldn't trust Greg and Rodrick to be on their own, and the parents making them stay there emphasized this. And at least in the original version, Greg and Rodrick were on the same page until the liar reveal storyline came in, resulting in Greg and Rodrick going back to being on bad terms with each other as soon as both of them get grounded. Meanwhile, in this movie, Greg and Rodrick were on bad terms with each other for most of the movie. It starts off with Rodrick locking Greg and Rowley in the basement all night, leaving them with nothing to eat. And when Greg basically gets back at Rodrick by threatening to tell their parents about the party, he basically guilt trips Greg into keeping things under wraps, but yet he still treats Greg like absolute garbage after he decides to clean up the mess that was entirely Rodrick's fault in the first place. Now, I know I've gotten onto Greg during the review of the first movie for how he treated Rowley, basically using his best friend's injury so he could get a table with him at lunch, but it actually goes into the opposite direction this time around. Greg tries to do the right thing, but gets guilt-tripped by Rodrick not to tell the parents, despite the fact that Greg has every reason in the world to not feel sorry for Rodrick. I mean, when Greg and Rodrick are forced to stay with their grandpa, Rodrick deliberately spits milk onto Greg's pants and then forces Greg to change his pants down in the lobby, despite the fact that he'd get publicly humiliated as a result. And he also gets called a peeping Tom because he accidentally walked into the girl's bathroom. Yeah, because the only thing that men think about is wanting to look at other women, apparently. Also, these grown women are chasing after a child over a misunderstanding. Just wonderful. I mean, at least in the live-action version, it was shown that Greg was voluntarily only wearing his underwear when he tried to chase after Rodrick, who was staring in his diary. Here, though, he was forced into this position. And in the live-action version, Rodrick only started acting like a jerk to Greg again after both of them get grounded. And by the way, in that movie, Greg actually did snitch on Rodrick. However, Greg was also trying to keep the events in the dark about what happened. It was only revealed that they threw a party because Greg and Rodrick took pictures and forgot to delete them from the camera. Here, though, Greg already took pictures, and because they randomly decided to have Greg be an idiot, he decided to not put the pictures in his pocket and just let them be in plain sight. The party gets discovered because Greg wasn't watching where he was going. He bumps into his mom, causing the pictures to fly into the air as she discovers the pictures. And while we're on this subject, while Greg is not as dislikable as he was in the first movie, he does a lot of stupid things that it would even make Patrick Star say that what you did was dumb. For instance, when Greg and Rowley had this one assignment due, which was this life board project, Greg begs Rodrick to give it to him, and then gets mad when Rodrick wasn't truthful with him, even though you should have looked at the project first before you took it to school with you, Greg. And then leaves his diary on the table, allowing anyone to grab a hold of it and read through it. Well, maybe you shouldn't have left it on the table in the first place, Greg. And why is Rodrick even taking this out on Greg at all? Greg literally tried to explain what happened, and he just wouldn't listen to him. And then, at the last moment, the film has the absolute audacity to try and manipulate the audience into feeling sympathy for Rodrick after everything he did throughout the entire movie, including in the sequence that happened before Greg was gonna steal Rodrick's spotlight in the talent show, because Greg didn't even want to steal his thunder in the first place until Rodrick decides to say something at the last moment to antagonize Greg. Reminder, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record in this review, Greg decided to sacrifice his dignity by being in Rowley's magic act in exchange for Rodrick being in the talent show in the original live-action movie, but here, we get nothing. The change that they decided to make to this sequence was that the parents decided to extend Greg and Roderick's punishment. Yeah, which ending do you prefer exactly? Because I know which ending I prefer in particular. So overall, Diary of a Wimpy Kid Rodrick Rules 2022 is pretty bad. I may not have liked the first movie all that much, but I could give that movie some props that the worst thing about it is that it was soulless and that the elements in that movie were executed much worse than its live action counterpart. Rodrick Rules is basically in that same boat, but those problems are made like 10 times worse with the manipulation aspect, where the film is expecting us to feel sorry for Rodrick after everything he did throughout the movie. While the film is not as bad as, say, Escape from Planet Earth or Ryan's World, the movie Titan Universe Adventure, because it's very clear that the people behind this movie were on a very tight schedule, this is yet another case of a shot-for-shot remake that completely misses the point of the movie that's meant to be a remake of.
Next.
Wait, what if someone sees us?
Let the cookers watch.
Everything